We once heard a story from a driver in downtown Halifax, Nova Scotia, who was annoyed that a cyclist was slowing him down. Do you know what he said? "You're not saving the environment, buddy." That was interesting. The assumption was that if you're on a bike trying to get somewhere, you must be doing it for environmental reasons, probably in an annoyingly self-righteous way. But what if it was just a convenient way to get to work without having to worry about parking? What if it was how he spends time with his kids? What if he just enjoys the fresh air and activity? What if he sold a car in order to save money for other priorities? What if he just finds driving unpleasant? None of this occurred to the driver. The assumption was that the cyclist was there on a bike, slowing them down for environmental reasons, probably climate change in particular.
And maybe he was. Environmentalism is definitely one reason that people choose or advocate for urban cycling, but it's one of many reasons. Cycling for us is a cheap, convenient, accessible, healthy, family-friendly, and fun way to get around, and it makes our lives better. Same with public transit. We've lived in places with better and worse transit, and we've decided that having better transit makes our lives better. We'd advocate for these things even if climate change didn't exist.
When critics or skeptics see urbanists entirely through the lens of environmentalism, it means they're seeing urbanism as sacrificial. We must sacrifice our quality of life for the sake of the environment. Addison Del Maestro, who blogs over at the Deleted Scenes on Substack, calls this the eat your vegetables model of urbanism, where critics see walkability, cycling, and transit as inherently inferior and inconvenient. And they think that urbanist advocates must also see these things the same way, just necessary inconveniences for the greater good.
Now, if somebody is cycling in a hostile environment, central Halifax is okay but not great, then there's a higher chance that they have at least a little of the activist or enthusiast in them, and they're actively trying to make it work despite some inconveniences. But even that's not always about the environment. Lots of people make cycling work in difficult cities for other reasons, like fitness or saving money. And if they're advocating for a more bike-friendly city, it's almost definitely because they believe it's good for people and the city, and not just the environment.
The most extreme version of viewing urbanism as sacrificial environmentalism is the conspiracy theories around 15-minute cities, where people believe that domineering activists and governments are planning to lock people in their neighborhoods to reduce carbon emissions.
But it's also become the focus of conspiracies that travel outside these neighborhoods would be restricted, a sort of climate lockdown.
This is completely unrecognizable to basically any transportation activist.
We have been receiving many calls and emails from worried residents in genuine fear that they might be locked in their own homes.
We're here trying to get new transit built, and you think we're hoping to lock you in your neighborhood? You do realize that these trains take people to different neighborhoods and even different cities, right? But this is something that people appear to genuinely believe and worry about.
You in your area will only be allowed within that 15-minute zone that you've been allocated.
The only way these wild conspiracy theories are possible is that a lot of these people really have no reference point for what a bike-friendly or transit-friendly city even looks like. Most urbanist activists are in the game based on their own experiences, living in or visiting a place with good transit or cycling. We could hypothetically have critics who did the same thing. You know, I visited Sweden last year. I just didn't find transit to be that useful, and I didn't like that gas was more expensive. Plus, the houses weren't as big. I'll stick with American car-oriented cities. But we don't get that, at least not very often. Instead, we get objections like, "You're trying to ban cars," or "You're trying to lock us in our neighborhood," that seem to come from basically nowhere.
Earlier this year, a video game YouTuber made a video about the big problem with urbanist YouTube and how it spends too much time showing off ideal cities and not enough time telling people how to create change at their local level.
In a way, urbanist YouTube has given terminology to a kind of slacktivism that involves identifying problems, but then not educating people on how to make urbanist principles a reality.
One reason for this is that local activism is inherently local, and it's hard for channels like ours to make targeted city-specific resources. That's a job for actual local groups organizing through Discord, Facebook, and real life. But a bigger reason Urbanist YouTube spends so much time covering success stories in transit or cycling, whether in Europe, Asia, or elsewhere, is that most people in North America still genuinely don't know what it means or even looks like for a city to not be car-centric. It just doesn't compute. Being able to show a place that's successfully done it is really useful. When someone responds to a bike lane proposal with, "But how do you do deliveries?" it's powerful to be able to point to Denmark or the Netherlands and say, "Do you think they don't have deliveries here?"
There's actually something similar with green energy. Do you think it's possible to have a zero-carbon power grid, or is that pie-in-the-sky utopianism? Well, we live in a place that currently has one. Quebec gets nearly all of its electricity from hydropower, with a smaller amount of wind. Next door, Ontario is more than 90% clean energy, mainly from nuclear. Bruce Power is one of the biggest nuclear plants in the world, supplemented by hydro and wind. This isn't seen as a major sacrifice for the environment. It's just normal and unremarkable, and mostly not politicized. Someday we hope to make it to the same place with trains and walkability. Yes, they are good for the environment, both climate change and local air quality, but they're not some big sacrifice.
And there are some areas where environmental concerns conflict with quality of life. Long-haul flights are bad for the environment, but it's also really nice to be able to visit faraway places that just aren't practical by train due to distance or oceans. It's hard to say how or whether we'll find a green solution to distances like New York to London, but there's also a lot of low-hanging fruit where the green solutions exist and are practical and competitive. If we had a high-speed train connecting our city of Montreal to Toronto or even New York, it would be good for the environment and make our lives better.
The point of this video is not to downplay environmentalism as an influence or motivating factor behind urbanism. Bikes and trains reduce carbon emissions and improve local air quality, and that's great. But it's a fundamental mistake to see urbanism solely through the lens of sacrificing for the environment. Most of us are in this because we've lived in or visited different kinds of cities, and decided that places with better transit, cycling, and walkability are better places to live. And to the buddy in the car at the beginning, no, cycling isn't going to save the environment, but it does help. And it's also fun, healthy, and convenient if your city supports it. Hopefully Halifax gets to the point on its bike infrastructure where you even join us someday.
Thanks for watching through to the end of the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And a special thanks to our supporters on Patreon.